It's absolutely nuts how many stats.
3, 2, 1.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's the Nittany No Huddle Podcast.
From Philadelphia to Los Angeles
and everywhere in between.
Filmed at the Nittany No Huddle studio.
It's Jordo, Zach, and Coach Devin covering all things Penn State football all the time.
This is from 45 and it's blocked. Lions scoop it up. Brad Haley will score.
And here we go.
We are back with another episode. If anybody's watching, that was a great start, so I hope you guys like that. So we are going over Penn State at Ohio State this weekend. Probably, I would argue, the biggest game of the season for us Penn State fans. Ohio State, obviously not going to say that, but guys, what do you think heading in to Columbus in the shoe? How are we looking? Because I have some opinions, but I want to hear what you guys are thinking first, and we can go through the offense, defensive side, whatever you guys want. What do you think?
I'll start, I guess. I think just probably the most confident, I would say, and I can't speak for the two of you, but just on the whole, probably the most confident that the Penn State fan base has been for a game where Penn State's going into Columbus in maybe ever, honestly. They've only won in Columbus like twice. I felt really good in 2017 about that team and that matchup, and frankly, the beginning of that game went wonderful for Penn State, and maybe we don't want to revisit that, but there just haven't been many years where you're going to Columbus and the expectation is anything other than, well, if this breaks our way and we get a big special teams play and we do this or we do that, and frankly, I think even like Penn State pessimists like myself are of the mindset if we go in and play our game and do what we've been doing and do what we want to do and expect to do, we can win. We don't need like crazy special teams plays or a defensive touchdown, or we're going to get into some individual position groups and talk about who's got better players at this position or that position. But I think we match up across the board pretty well. They're a really good team. Don't get me wrong, but I think if you look sort of across the roster with the depth and some of the star power at key positions, we match up well with Ohio State as I think I can ever remember Penn State matching up with Ohio State.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. This year is just so wild because I feel like there is no truly elite team. Like in years past, I know Devin and I were talking about this earlier. You know, you had that Bama, that Georgia, who was just like, I don't think anybody can beat them. And this year it's like, well, I think anybody could beat any of the top teams. Like, so it's kind of crazy. And the Vegas line kind of reflects that with what I think it's down to 4.5. Ohio State's favorited. So that's pretty crazy considering they're at home and they're the number 3 team in the country. So maybe Vegas knows something we don't, but I'm super excited for this game. I think this is, in all the years, most recent years, I think this is our best chance to knock off Ohio State. Devin, what do you think?
Yeah, I think Zach said it best, is that you look at every position group across the board, and I think that this team matches up really, really well with Ohio State, all the way from position A to position Z. I think everywhere across the board that we have a shot at not just matching them, but being better than them in a lot of regards. And that's something that we haven't been able to say for a Penn State-Ohio State game in a long time. Even to Zach's point, even 17, 18, excuse me, where I think everyone kind of thought that we had a chance in those games. And I mean, even looking back to the games that we have won against Ohio State, which I know Franklin's only won one. I look back to like 06 and the Tamba Hali play. It's like Zach said, you need one of these crazy electric plays. You need a blocked field goal return for a touchdown to beat Ohio State. I don't think that's the case this weekend. I think if we do everything we're supposed to do and we just do what we have been doing through 6 weeks, we're going to be in the game the whole time. I mean, you look at last year, I think Ohio State's team was better last year. And we were right there, a couple plays, a couple miscues in the fourth quarter, and that game's totally different. And I think it could be a very similar situation here of which team makes fewer mistakes, because I think both teams are really good, and I think both teams have the capability to force big plays, but which team makes fewer mistakes could be the difference.
Yep, I agree. And when talking about position groups and how we line up, I think the only glaring position group where they have a massive advantage is definitely wide receiver.
Correct.
Marvin
But
Harrison,
when you can compare it wide receiver versus DB,
yes,
that's more what we mean. But like, yes, I would agree with you that their wide receivers are 100% better than our wide receivers. Absolutely agree.
yeah. And I would argue, I mean, their DBs versus our wide receivers, I don't know. I don't know how good Ohio State is or how good we are, to be honest. And it's kind of crazy that we're usually at this point in the season, you're kind of like, okay, like they are who they are, but I just don't know if our receiving core is capable enough to beat Ohio State, and maybe we don't need them to be with our tight end play, especially Tyler Warren. I think he's the better of the two tight ends, which is kind of crazy to say, but he's definitely performed a lot better in my opinion. But Zach, what do you think about position groups? We can go down in the nitty gritty if you want.
Yeah, I mean, I think Devin obviously hit the nail on the head that we just simply don't have receivers. Or I guess it was you that right. Devin was right that it's really important to look at the receivers for Ohio State in the context of like our defensive backs. But when you do compare the receiver groups, it's just I don't think anybody in the country has the receiver room that Ohio State has. And frankly, one of the things we're going to talk about is the injury and the health status right now, where I think Penn State's in a little bit better shape with Ibuka being a little bit banged up. That hurts them. I mean, they just have so many guys. They got a freshman, Cardinal Tate, that I think is going to be a really good player. It's kind of like their number 4 right now. So, yeah, you want your guys fully loaded and fully healthy at that position. They're not going to be hurting for receivers really, no matter who plays and how healthy they are. But for me, what's interesting is I feel like these teams are kind of like mirror opposites of themselves right now with Penn State. Well, I shouldn't say opposites, but defensively, both teams are strong defensively, I think, and good at certain aspects on offense, and then have weaknesses that are sort of the opposite. That's where with right now with Penn State, I think we've got a really good solid run game, but everybody's a little concerned, and we're not really breaking off big runs. And so the question becomes, when you start to face better defenses and better run defenses, how sustainable is it, or how reasonable is it to expect that we're going to be able to just put together like 18 play drives and just keep gaining 3 or 4 yards against an Ohio State type defense. The flip side is Ohio State, to my mind, has been struggling to run the ball all year. I think if maybe there's some Ohio State fans that'll be in the comments and correct me, but what I see is when they face anybody with a pulse, Notre Dame, even Maryland, they could not run the ball against Maryland. I think the stat I saw today was they are averaging 3.7 yards per carry against Power 5 competition, and that's like shocking based on the Ohio State standard. So a lot of the things we're going to be talking about tonight, or at least I'm going to be talking about, is measuring Ohio State not against like the average team, right, but against the standard that Ohio State has set for itself. Because I think if you're an Ohio State fan, that's all that matters. Like they're not comparing themselves to like the average team or the average Big Ten team. They're comparing themselves to, we're Ohio State, we want to win a national title. And so I just think defensively, Penn State, like if we are who we think we are defensively, you come in there, they can't run the ball. They haven't been able to run the ball on lesser teams. So if they run the ball on us, that's a problem, and that's on us. And then obviously the star power they have on offense. So that's where you just I think the strength of the team that I've said from day one is that the front 4 and sort of the front 7 with the pass rush. You've got a quarterback who I think is better than a lot of people are giving him credit for, but I don't think Kyle McCord is going to be a CJ Stroud or a Dwayne Haskins or one of these guys that's able to just sort of make something out of nothing. And so I think if the pass rush can get there, he's gonna have to throw the ball out quick. He's not going to beat you with his legs. He's not terribly immobile, but he's definitely not a guy that's going to be punishing us if the pass rush gets there and maybe springs him for a long one. So I don't know. I see some similarities in this team. I think both teams are better. Both teams are going to rely on their defense. I think the coaches are going to be somewhat conservative, somewhat cautious, not want to take chances with first-year quarterbacks in a really big game where both coaches like their defense. So I think you could see a pretty slow start from both teams, maybe into the first half, and then it starts to pick up into the second half. But yeah, I just think if you're Penn State, you ride that defense. Don't do anything offensively that can put you behind the 8 ball or put your defense in a tight spot.
So you're saying we shouldn't just go out and throw it down the field?
Just 4 verts, hit the X button, and just send it long.
Yeah, shout out to 2 of our viewers watching. Jeffrey says we can't start off slow against Ohio State. We need to take it to them early and often. I kind of agree. We have been very sluggish on the road. I'm hoping we come out. Yeah, I'm hoping we come out with a little bit more fire. It is Ohio State. Typically, we do play Ohio State well in the first half. That usually isn't our issue. It's usually the fourth quarter, to be honest, historically.
Yeah, and we've frankly played. I'll give Franklin credit, and I don't like to do that sometimes, but he has had the team ready to play in Columbus every time they've gone out there. Basically since 2013 or 20. I think his first trip out there we got skunked pretty bad, but basically since 2015. No, 2015 was maybe, I can't remember. The first year we went out there, we got beat pretty badly. But since then, Franklin has had the team ready to play, and we showed pretty well in Columbus. So I don't expect that to change.
It was 2014.
2014,
yeah. And for those of you watching, if you're an Ohio State fan, what we're talking about is grading on a curve. You may not know what that is, but I just want to put that out there. It's a joke, but all right. Shout out to Paul Wall. I wonder if it's the real Paul Wall, but OSU 31-28. So that's maybe a little higher than I would think, but probably a realistic score. Maybe depends. Marvin Harrison, obviously an elite athlete. I don't know. Is he still kind of banged up? I know he hurt his ankle again, I think.
He hurt his ankle in the Notre Dame game. I think he's pretty much back to normal. At least that's, I've not seen any reporting that he's probably dinged up, because at this point in the season, everybody's a little bit dinged up. But Ibuka is the guy that they're more concerned about. And basically they have like four starters, Ibuka, the receiver, two of the running backs, and then their top cornerback, Denzel Burke, who I'm sure we'll talk about. All were, I think Ryan Day's language was like, we're hopeful that we'll have them with us, or some kind of like very wishy-washy language like that didn't really convey one way or the other, whether some of those guys are closer than others. It just kind of was like, basically all these college football coaches, unlike in the NFL, they don't tell you anything. They don't have to tell you anything.
Yeah. Lou Holtz would say that sounds kind of soft, but that's him, not us. Yeah, I'm excited to see our defense go against a real opponent, which I feel like we haven't had yet. West Virginia obviously has only one other loss, but obviously they're not the offense of Ohio State. So it'll be interesting to see. It'll be a real proving point for both quarterbacks, really both of their first big games. Neither quarterback has lost a game they started yet. So a lot of similarities between Aller and Kyle McCord. Both have extremely high touchdown to interception ratios. I think Kyle McCord only has one interception.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I don't even remember if that was his fault, to be honest. I don't remember what the interception was, but you can't just always look at the stats and just be like, oh, okay. Which I've seen a lot of people pulling up the stat books, the historics. It's like, okay, that's great, but that's not this team. Like, yeah, there's similarities, but it's not the same. So I see it on both sides, from Penn State fans, from Ohio State fans. I feel like most people are getting so bogged down in the historic stats, and it's just like, all right, let's look at the teams, how they are today. Yeah, Franklin has only beat Ohio State once. Okay, well, Kirby Smart didn't beat Alabama at all until he did. So it's like, that's kind of how I take it. I don't know how you guys feel about all the commentary online or anything like that, but do you guys want to talk about the defense a little bit?
Yeah, I'll jump in. Sticking with the defense, as I often do, I like to pull up the stat sheet and look at the comparisons and try to find where there are, especially at this point in the season, where the first couple of weeks the stats don't really always tell the story, and they might be lopsided based on competition. But at this point in the season, you kind of figure out who you are and what you're good at and what you're not good at. And again, hitting on the defensive metrics. Obviously, if you've been following Penn State this year, number one total defense in yards per game, number two defense in scoring per game, number one in passing defense, yardage per game, and pass efficiency defense. Again, what we've talked about throughout the season, we haven't really faced a lot of high-powered passing games, so maybe that's suspect. Who knows? on the other side of the ball, Ohio State is number 3 in scoring defense. They're number 7 in total defense in terms of yards per game. They're number 4 in passing defense yards per game and number 3 in passing efficiency defense. So again, that gets me kind of back to these teams. Again, based on the competition they've played, maybe it's not the total story, but they've been very good against the pass, both in terms of not just yardage, but also in efficiency. So I go back to these two coaches knowing how big of a game this is with still somewhat green quarterbacks. And I just see a lot of early, especially the first quarter, maybe even the first half, a lot of just kind of leaning on your running game. To use the boxing analogy, two teams that are just going to kind of be throwing jabs at each other, not necessarily taking haymaker shots, just try to get to halftime where you can go in and readjust. And that's where, again, based on if it plays out that way, I think that's where Penn State has an advantage, because I'm not convinced Ohio State can run the ball. And again, I'm not convinced that Penn State is really going to be capable of hitting home runs in the run game, but we've shown we have that ability to just move the sticks, get 4 yards a carry. Again, Ohio State, I referenced earlier, they're averaging 3 yards per carry against Power 5 competition. And not only is that not good for like the Ohio State standard, I just don't think that's very good. As far as where they stack up in the country, rush defense wise, they're number 22. They're only giving up 109 rush yards per game. But as far as their rushing offense, they're 92nd in the country in rushing yards per game. So I don't necessarily know, again, that means we're going to have a huge advantage in terms of our run game versus their run game. But I think it's at least going to be an even match there for us. So I think from our perspective, you gotta figure out how to lock down Marvin Harrison as best you can. You got to figure out how to put pressure on Kyle McCord, and you just dare the run game to beat you. One guy that I think from Penn State defensive perspective that I'm worried about, just knowing what he did last year, and I think it's a guy that kind of flies under the radar, is their tight end Kate Stover. He's really good. He had a lot of nice plays last year against Penn State. I think one area of potential weakness for Penn State is opposing teams with good tight ends, because frankly in the Big Ten you just don't see that. Nobody other than Ohio State and Michigan, a lot of these, especially the Big Ten West teams, like they're just putting tight ends out there and just treating it as extra, like an extra offensive tackle. And Stover's good. And I just wonder, Abdul Carter, Curtis Jacobs, these guys are great at blitzing. He's great at, chasing down the ball carrier, getting after the quarterback, spying the quarterback. I don't think we've really had to see them play a lot of, pass coverage against really good quality tight ends. So that's a matchup I'm going to be watching for. Is does Ohio State say, okay, you know what, we really respect Kalen King and Johnny Dixon, and we know the pass rush is really good. So we've got to be careful. We can't be running too many long developing pass plays, and we don't really want to challenge their top corners. So let's just hammer the middle of the field and let's make their linebackers cover Kate Stover. I really think that's a matchup to keep your eye on.
Yeah, I'll be excited to see how we run our coverage, if we are going to drop those guys back to cover the tight ends, that sort of thing. It'll be an interesting matchup for sure. I'm very excited to see, obviously, Marvin Harrison, Kalen King matchup. We really haven't seen anybody challenge Kalen King yet. They just don't throw it his way. So with Abuka being injured, it'll be interesting to see if they try to force that to Marvin Harrison, or if he's just going to be open. It'll kind of be a good test. I know Kalen King last year, he was my favorite defensive player. But it was kind of similar where you saw Joey Porter not being challenged. So Kalen King was taking most of those. So who do we think is going to be that, real true number 2 cornerback that may be in trouble this weekend? Devin or Zach, feel free to chime in.
I guess I can chime in. I don't really know that I would say that I feel like our cornerbacks would be in trouble beyond Kalen King. We're so deep and we've played so well. Johnny Dixon has played really, really well. Daquan Hardy does a lot of good things. And then, our safeties are playing really well. Keaton Ellis, Zaki Wheatley. All these guys that we just keep naming week after week. I think we have the best secondary in the nation. And if Abuka is a little bit dinged up, that means a focus really comes on Julian Fleming for their wide receivers, a kid who was a Penn State guy and decommitted and all that drama, and has never really shown anything, but played pretty well against Penn State last year and had a couple big games down the stretch. And he's somebody that I think when he sees Penn State, he probably that probably hits him a little bit harder, and he probably wants to play extra well, excuse me, in that game. To backtrack a little bit to kind of some things that Zach said about with like the rushing game, what I see from Ohio State is I see a weaker offensive line than they've had in maybe a decade. I don't want Ohio State fans to come at my head in the comments, and I'm not saying they're bad by any stretch, but comparatively over the last 5 to 8 years, this is probably one of the weakest offensive linemen. And I think part of it is just experience. You look at their ages. I mean, you got a sophomore transfer, you got a sophomore, a freshman, a graduate at right guard with Matthew Jones, and then you got a junior at right tackle. So you're starting 3 really young dudes out there on the line. And I just, to me, I think Trainium, or however you say his name, I'm never going to say it right. I just don't care enough to try. However you say it, I think he's a really good running back, and it will not surprise me at all if he gets 100 yards. But I just don't think that their offensive line is the offensive line that they have been for a long time. And then to flip over to Penn State's defense, I think that's a great sign because we should get pressure. Adisa Isaac should be in the backfield. Chop Robinson should be in the backfield. DDS should be in the backfield. We should be making plays. I mean, when I broke down some stats today to look at, what really stood out to me is that our leading tackler through 6 games has 23 tackles. And I think that just shows how many guys we're playing and how deep we are across the board. And all these blowout games that we've been able to play a lot of guys is we are going to be fresh this week. There's no doubt about it. Comparatively, we should be very fresh and we should be able to get after it. Again, absolutely no disrespect to Dom DeLuca. I love the kid, but he's our second leading tackler this year. And to me, and yes, he's played very well, but you look at the guys on our defense, he should not be our second leading tackler. And it's just a minutes thing. I think Zach's usually good with snap counts, and I don't want to bring that up tonight, but I'm sure his snap count is probably higher than a lot of these guys like Abdul Carter, et cetera. So I'm just really excited to see our defense actually play the whole game and see what we're able to do as a unit. I don't feel confident that Ohio State's going to be able to score enough, and we'll get into our predictions here, I'm sure not too long. I think our defense is absolutely elite, that Ohio State's offense is not going to be able to score enough. Not that I think we're going to score a lot either, but I don't think Ohio State can score enough against us. You look at that Notre Dame game. I mean, I think that Notre Dame's defense is comparatively pretty close to what type of defense we are, the type of defense Ohio State is. I mean, Notre Dame is kind of playing like a Big Ten team right now. So I think our defense should have a field day.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, we can move ahead into our predictions. I don't want to run too long with this video, but just off the bat, my gut feeling was Penn State 28, Ohio State 20. And for all the reasons you just stated, I don't know if they're going to be able to score. And I feel like there's an overwhelming amount of pressure on Ryan Day right now, whether he wants to admit it or not. Like, Ohio State fans are crazy. I thought, like, Penn State fans, they get after Franklin sometimes. But, I mean, you're talking about a guy who's been to the playoffs twice. Yeah, they've lost the last 2 Big Ten, obviously to Michigan. But, like, they're coming for his head some weekends. And I don't know what's going to happen if he doesn't perform this weekend. And they've been in some closer games than they probably should have been. I mean, typically you would think they would handle Maryland pretty easily, but, you know, Maryland made some huge mistakes in that game that really let them open it up a little bit. But that's my prediction. I'm going to Penn State 28, Ohio State 20.
I can go next.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I can go next. One thing I did want to say, I know we were trying to keep this right under 30, so I'll be very quick. Ohio State defensively, we didn't really talk too much about them. I love Tommy Eichenberg. I think he's awesome. I think he plays the game really well. I really, really like him. A name to keep an eye on, in my opinion, and this shouldn't be a surprise if you've watched Ohio State, is Talik Williams. I think JTT will be such a focal point for Penn State's offensive line and running backs chipping him and doing different things. that I'm a little concerned that Williams, number 91, is going to wreak havoc, and he's going to have a big game. So he's a guy that I'm looking for. Can we defend these really, really good defensive linemen in JTT and Williams? And I think, who's the other guy? Hamilton, I think. He's really good too. So I would keep an eye on them. For all those reasons, everything we've said here, I'm going to go a little weird on my score just because I have a gut feeling, like Jordan said. I'm going to go Ohio State 19, Penn State 14. And Ohio State wins it on a touchdown in the fourth quarter. So they get 4 field goals. Penn State is winning 14-12. And Ohio State scores a touchdown in the last 3 or 4 minutes to win it. And it's going to hurt more than ever.
Well, thanks. I won't be able to sleep tonight, so I appreciate that.
You're welcome. Hey, I hope I'm wrong. I pray I'm wrong, but that's what I'm feeling.
Yeah, I mean, I could definitely see it going that way, especially Franklin, we know, hasn't had the best track.
Timeout.
Yeah. I hope it's not close in the fourth quarter. That's all I hope.
It's definitely going to be. It's definitely going to be. So, yeah, I think this is – I would be shocked if either team gets away from the other more than a touchdown or maybe 10 points at the most. Frankly, I don't think there's going to be that many points scored, really. I really do believe, especially in the first half, both coaches – I don't want to say they're going to coach scared, but I think they realize what type of game this is, and I think they realize it's going to be a fourth quarter game. So there's going to be some especially with the quarterbacks, and at this point, it's hard to even say that either one of them is really a rookie because they got half a season under their belt. But I think it's clear how the staff has treated Aller, and I don't want to say it's with kid gloves, but it's clearly they've tried to keep stuff off of his plate and make life easier. And so anyway, all that to say, I think it's going to be low scoring. I've got Penn State winning 17-16. For me, Devin kind of touched on this a little bit, and if you go back to last year's post-game Ohio State rant that I think maybe Jordan, you were on that one, but Devin and I went an hour or something. For me, there was a lot of talk about the quarterback play, and Clifford, I think, actually played really well and had a few horrible boneheaded mistakes, but generally actually played very well. And CJ Stroud wasn't really asked to do anything crazy because Penn State didn't really get home with the pass rush, and then they played a lot of man blitz with soft umbrella coverage. But for me, that game was won at the ends of the line of scrimmage. The offensive tackles and defensive ends. JT Tuimoloau just destroyed Bryce Effner. Caden Wallace was hurt. Caden Wallace has kind of been a punching bag for Penn State fans, but frankly, if they have Caden Wallace at right tackle last year, that game goes maybe differently. I don't mean to signal out Bryce Effner, and he did a lot of good things last year, but in that matchup, he just got absolutely ragdolled. And some of those interceptions and the strip sack that you might point to Clifford were just 100% not his fault. And it seems like every year in this matchup, Ohio State is the team that has Nick Bosa, that has Joey Bosa, that has Chase Young, that has last year JT Tuimoloau. For whatever reason, he really didn't do anything else last year against anybody else, and I don't think he's really been utterly dominant this year. I agree with Devin. I think the defensive tackles, Hamilton and Williams, are actually the better players on that Ohio State front. I think this is the year where Penn State is better at offensive tackle and they're better at defensive end / outside linebacker. I've not been impressed with the offensive tackle play. I think they're pretty good at guard. I think Matthew Jones especially is a pretty good guard, but they've got youth and inexperience at tackle. Frankly, they had to go out and bring in a transfer to start at one of the tackle positions. I just think Chop Robinson, Adisa Isaac, Denai Dennis Sutton, Abdul Carter, Curtis Jacobs, all of those guys bringing that pressure off the end. If the defensive tackles can push the pocket and do their job, I just really like that matchup for Penn State. And it's crazy to say that because it's been that position group and that spot on the field has been so one-sided. Basically since Urban Meyer got to Ohio State, we have been dominated at the offensive tackle, defensive end interchange. And I think we have them there this year. And I really think if both quarterbacks just kind of play mistake-free, it's not going to be a game that's decided by the quarterback play. I think a lot of the national commentators are kind of – everybody loves to talk about quarterbacks, so they're setting it up with one of McCord or Aller's going to make a crucial mistake and it's going to cost the team the game. I don't really see it that way. I think the coaches are going to kind of protect those guys, and it's going to be the team whose defensive front can cause more havoc because, again, I don't think either team can run the ball that well. in this matchup, I don't expect to see either team really pound and ground. So all that to say, I'm not expecting a lot of offense, but I'm expecting just enough of a run game, just enough out of Valor, and maybe an interception or a strip sack or some kind of key defensive play from, an Idisa Isaac or Chop Robinson that gives Penn State just enough to help the offense. And again, I'm going 17-16.
Yeah, very low scoring. Yeah, I don't know. It really is, to me, a coin flip. It could really go either way. Vegas has kind of relayed that to being only a 4.5-point spread at home.
So, yeah, I was going to say the same thing. The fact that it's in the shoe and they're only 4.5-point favorites. I mean, we have said before that home field in college football can be up to like 7 to 10 point advantage. So the fact that they're saying it's only 4,
it's definitely like a toss-up game on a neutral field, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited.
So I know we're trying to wrap up, but
Yeah,
do you think Penn State would be favorites if everything is the same, but this game is in Beaver Stadium? Do you think Penn State would be the favorite this weekend?
If it's a night game, yeah.
No, it's big noon. It's always going to be big noon.
Yeah. I don't know. It's a great question. I wouldn't be shocked if it was like Penn State -1 or, just a straight even game. I don't know. I mean, you're right. I think home field in real football terms can be worth a touchdown or 7 points. I think if you talk to most like gambling experts, I think generally they treat home field as worth like 3 or 4 points. So again, I think that basically puts it back into like if this was a neutral field, it's just a toss up. If it's at Beaver Stadium, it might be Penn State -1 or 2, and I don't know. I just one item. While we're talking, kind of connected to gambling, not really, but you hear the stat all the time about James Franklin. He's like 0-9 or 0-10 or whatever it is versus top 10 teams on the road, and so I'm as pessimistic as I am, and as much as I'd love to maybe doubt Franklin, I'm also I've always been a big believer in law of averages, and part of stats can be misleading, right? And that stat that you hear thrown around all the time is mostly undermanned Penn State teams playing a top 5 Ohio State on the road, or a top 5 Michigan on the road, or go way back to like a sanctions era Penn State playing a top 10 Michigan State on the road, and it's kind of the see. Yes, you can't be 0-10 against top 10 teams on the road, but like unless you're Nick Saban, you're gonna have like only a few wins and a lot of losses in that category. It's just not. Generally speaking, you don't go on the road and beat top 10 teams in their building. It just doesn't happen. Yeah. And so I don't know. It's one of those things where like I need to see it to believe it, but I also believe in the law of averages, and we're just due. And I also believe, like I said, I really do believe this. Go back and look, 2021, 2019 when Clifford got hurt and Will Levis played. Penn State has played Ohio State really tougher than expected in the shoe. So there's just something about, as much as he preaches Akron, or Kent State, they know what this week means. And again, he hasn't beaten Ohio State in a while, but the one thing you have to give him is they're ready to play. I don't expect the sort of like sleepy Northwestern noon start that we've seen, frankly, too much this season.
Yeah, and real quick before we head out, we didn't really talk special teams, but are we going to see Daquan Hardy returning some punts this weekend?
We better. I mean, it better not be Caden Saunders.
Yeah.
First player in Penn State history with 2 punt returns in the same game. That's pretty impressive. I know it's UMass, but it's pretty cool.
Yeah. And he didn't, muff any of them. So that's all I can ask for.
Yeah, exactly. Zach has been saying this for years. You don't need to return them for touchdowns. Just don't lose us anything.
Yeah, exactly.
Field the ones you should field and don't field the ones you shouldn't.
Yeah, and part of that too is like I wouldn't expect a whole lot because Ohio State generally has good punting, and if you have good punting, like you're not going to get returns.
Right.
Massachusetts, those kicks, he kind of outkicked the coverage, so the coverage units were down there. And again, it's one of those things where like you really trust your defense. So like, would I love Saunders or Hardy or somebody to break off a big return against Ohio State? Sure, but it's just catch the ball, play offense. Like the absolute worst case scenario, go 3 and out, punt it, and let your defense do its thing. The absolute worst case scenario is give Ohio State the ball in plus territory, and you're just like you're shooting yourself in the foot with what is the strength of your team.
Yeah, and I feel like it goes both ways for Ohio State and Penn State because we both kind of play similar styles of defense. So I think that's about all we got. We're at 35 minutes, so we'll wrap this up. Thanks everybody for watching. We'll be live after the game for an instant reaction. Hopefully, I'll be celebratory drinking and not depressed drinking. So,
Let's hope. Fingers crossed.
fingers crossed. So. But I think that's about all we got. Do you guys have anything else you want to add before we head out here?
Thanks to everybody who was tuning in. I think we were at like 12 live viewers. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. And make sure if you haven't subscribed, go ahead and subscribe. We try to put out at least one video a week. We've been kind of busy lately, so it's been lacking a little bit. But thanks again for watching. Nittany No Huddle out.
Thanks for watching the Nittany No Huddle podcast.
Check us out on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook.
Podcasts are posted weekly on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Make sure to like and subscribe so you never miss one of our new shows.